Yoshi Players, this is Yoshi Player here. Now, if you've been paying attention to my channel over the past few years, then you may notice that I've never actually reviewed anything related to live action. I suppose you can't really blame me, because I am hugely into animation. It's something that's always been interesting me. Ever since I review stuff that's related to movies or TV, it's always got something to do with animation. And truth be told, in the past few years, people have always been asking me to take a look at live action films. So I figured, to spice things up for this new year, I'm going to take a look at a few live action movies. Yes, I'm actually going to review some live action films, all in this one video. Now, I'm not going to do full reviews of these movies, I'm just going to give you my quick thoughts on the ones that I've watched. And keep in mind, this list is not every live action film I've seen. There's definitely plenty I have seen, but these are the ones I just want to talk about for this video. You okay with that? Okay, good. And don't be upset if you don't see a movie that you really like on this list, because like I said, I haven't seen everything. And there's like a bajillion live action films out there. With that out of the way, I figured it's time for me to get started. And what better way to start off with the very first live action film I ever saw, and way back when I was a kid, Homeward Bound: The Incredible Journey. Yeah, this was the very first live action film I ever saw as a kid, and rewatching it today, I still think it holds up. By the way, am I the only person that completely forgot the fact that this is actually a Disney movie? For those of you who have never seen this movie is about a family of pets who gets taken away by their families because of some vacation or something, but the pets think their families have abandoned them, so they embark on this incredible journey, as the film calls it, to find their way back home to their owners. If there's one thing I really like about this movie is that it actually nails the explanation of how these animals behave. They are animals, so of course they think differently. When they think they're being taken to the pound, they think they're going to stay there forever and have no idea that their owners are picking them up. Or especially the fact that they're taken to that farm. They think they're going to be left there forever, but they don't realize that their owners are going to come back and get them. This isn't because they're stupid, it's because they're animals, and I feel like this is actually a good way of showing that animals can be simple-minded sometimes, but they can also be incredibly loyal and helpful as well. The voice cast they got for this movie is really good as well. Michael J. Fox does a good job as Chance, Sally Field does a good job as Sassy, and I love Donna Mitchell's voice as Shadow. His voice just fits him perfectly. It's also great that these animals' voices don't actually have their mouths moving up and down like they do in most kids' movies nowadays. But still, this is a nice movie that's worth checking out. May not be amazing, but it's the first movie I saw as live action, and I thought it held up pretty well. But sometimes it doesn't just have to be kids' movies. I also get my daily dose of comedy, and the funniest movies that I've ever seen, personally, are the Monty Python movies. You all remember these movies. They're full of some of the funniest and clever writing I've ever seen in live-action history. These movies are hilarious. These are some of the funniest movies I've ever saw for good reason. Everything about these movies are perfect. I love the comedy, I love how silly they are, and I love their stories as well. True, at points the films do drag on, but they do make up for it with even more funny comedy. And when a joke doesn't work, it's immediately followed by like 20 more good jokes. They're just that good. In fact, depending on where you live, you can get the whole trilogy now on Blu-ray. I highly recommend you do it, it's totally worth it. But that's not the only comedy I can enjoy. What about The Mask? Yes, this was another childhood movie of mine, and to this day I still think it holds up. Okay, I don't think the film is hilarious, not as much as Monty Python, but for a movie that I saw as a kid, I still thought it was pretty funny. I thought the scenes with the actual Mask character were funny, and the straight man stuff is good enough stuff for the adults. Definitely a decent movie that I think people should check out. It actually did a pretty good job as blending in computer animation as something that's not meant to be gory. So yeah, I think it looks pretty well. And even to this day, I think the CG still looks okay. And before you ask, I've never seen Son of the Mask, and I'm never going to. But some other comedies I really liked included Zoolander, which was just absolutely hilarious because of how silly it was, Happy Gilmore, probably the funniest Adam Sandler movie I've ever seen, and Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, movie that my parents wanted to show me, and it was funny, and yeah, it is Jim Carrey, so of course it would be very silly as hell. But I didn't want to talk too much about all the comedy movies because I feel like I just pretty much repeat what I said. I want to talk more about the other movies that also left an impact on me, and one film that I remember very fondly of was Castaway. This movie, starring Tom Hanks, who crash lands on an island, is pretty damn good. There are so many scenes about this movie that I remember, and it's such a joy to sit through. Sure, some people may say, oh, this movie's boring because it's just him on the island, but it's so fascinating seeing him how he's going to survive. And all the little things that come into his journey of trying to survive are actually pretty entertaining. And who can forget the scenes with Wilson? These scenes are actually kind of funny. Okay, I guess I shouldn't say they're funny in a good way. It's funny because, he's talking to an inanimate object. But at the same time, these scenes are also surprisingly a bit heartwarming because, well, that's the only friend that Tom Hanks has ever had. And that scene where Wilson is drifting away, yeah, it was funny because, again, it's an inanimate object. But it was also heartbreaking because, as I said, it's the only friend that Tom Hanks has ever had while he was on the island. And the ending as well indicates what he's going to do next. This movie is full of a bunch of surprises, and it does a really good job with its storytelling. Definitely a movie I recommend you check out. But there's also the dose of movies that I just love to get into the action and technology. And one movie that I just love so much, actually it's more of a trilogy, the Back to the Future movies. These movies take advantage of the time-traveling technology, and it's actually really well done. Most time-traveling movies usually have stories that are very complicated, and yeah, it was hard for me to follow the story in this movie, but once I did, it was just a joyous ride. Everything in this trilogy is really well done. The time-traveling itself is a creative idea, all the technology they use in the movie is great, the soundtrack is fantastic, and I love our two main actors. They're just perfect. And of course, all those memorable lines and moments still stick in my head to this day. But if we're also going to talk about technology, it's also time to talk about Star Wars. Probably the most popular franchise that I'm going to talk about in this video. Star Wars, for the most part, is pretty good. What can I say about Star Wars? It does everything right, mostly. The original trilogy especially is one of my favorite trilogies of all time. Everything about it is really well done. Whether it's the original version or the special edition, this trilogy is still great in my opinion. The characters are great, the action is fun, everything about it is just good. Even the comedy is surprisingly done well as well. I also gotta say that I really liked the new Star Wars movies as well, like Episode 7 and Episode 8. Even though I'm pretty fucking mad that a lot of people spoiled the ending in Episode 8, these two movies are still pretty damn good. But being in Australia, there's also a few movies here that are actually made in Australia. And there's one movie I've seen that I'm particularly very loved. That movie is Red Dog. Never heard of this movie? Well, it's probably because you don't live here in Australia. This movie tells the real life story of a dog, who they call Red Dog, or just Red for short, lives in a town called Dampier, and it comes across all of these characters, making all these events happen and making their lives better. Red Dog is based on a true story, where after his owner died, he traveled a large chunk of Australia and even went to Japan at one point to find his owner. This story is really sweet, and this movie does a great job of retelling that story. On top of that, it also offers some very likable characters that I would just love to hang out with in real life. Is it perfect? No. Even though I really like the comedy in this movie, there are a few jokes that aren't really that great. Like, for example, they have two fart jokes in the movie, and they basically play it off as, oh, that's terrible, because, it's a dog. Yeah, this movie's not perfect, but honestly, out of all movies I've seen in Australia, this movie is just amazing. If you live in Australia, please check this movie out. And if you're someone who's actually able to own this movie somewhere else, please check it out. It's definitely worth your time. Too bad the prequel didn't really do any of that. Yeah, I also saw the prequel to Red Dog called True Blue, and honestly, I wasn't really a big fan of this movie. Even though the first film had some very likable characters and ones I just want to hang out with, this movie has characters that are so one-dimensional and unlikable. Not even the dog can save this movie. Not exactly a big fan of this movie. I love the original, but the prequel is just a big disappointment. And since we're talking about disappointing movies, I figure it's about time I drift into the movies I definitely was not fond of. And I figure we start off with a movie that I used to love as a kid for some strange reason, but hate today, Kangaroo Jack. I don't know what it was in me that liked this movie as a kid, but nowadays, this movie's pretty stupid. It feels like it's trying to be two movies at once. One of them is about some criminal charges or some shit like that, and the other is trying to be a kid's film with comedy and kangaroos. Yeah, I know this movie is set in Australia, but I still don't like it. It's a piece of shit. It's so stupid, and the comedy is just awful. On a side note, this movie won Best Fart Awards at the Kids' Choice Awards. I'm not joking. That's not the only comedy disaster I've ever seen, and this next movie tricked me because of its video game elements. I'm of course talking about Pixels. First off, I'll say this, I really like the effects in this movie. It almost makes me believe that these are what the video game characters would look like if they were in our world. But man, this movie was lacking! The comedy was just terrible. And I saw Happy Gilmore, as I said before, I really liked it, but every Adam Sandler movie that came out after that movie just felt like a disappointment. And this one was just awful. The comedy itself is terrible, and it just repeats the same cliches that we keep seeing in Adam Sandler movies nowadays. And I know I haven't seen that many, but still, it was done in Happy Gilmore, and they're still doing it. Not even the video game elements can save it. Wreck-It Ralph did this job much better. But you want to know something? Not every bad movie is actually bad. Sometimes it can actually be a masterpiece. You know I'm talking about The Room, don't you? I'm particularly going to talk about this movie because I just saw The Disaster Artist, and yeah, spoiler alert, that movie's really good. But for the movie it was based on, yeah, it's bad, but I can't deny it's pretty damn hilarious. It's just so good in a bad way. This movie's so bad, the acting is bad, the story's bad, the drama is bad, but it's just so spectacularly hilarious that I can't stop watching it. Pretty much everyone's already talked about it at this point, and that's understandable because The Disaster Artist just came out, and that's actually another movie I saw that I really like. Definitely recommend you check it out. But back on topic, we have to talk about the bad movies, unfortunately. And one movie that I particularly don't like that people kept saying was a classic, The Grinch. I recently rewatched this movie because everyone was saying it was a classic, and no, it's not. Oh, unless you mean it's a classic and it's terrible. This movie is just stupid. It fucks up the whole story that the original got so well, and the comedy is just awful. This movie should not be trying to do adult humor. It's Dr. Seuss. It's meant to be for kids. Why are you throwing this kind of shit in a Dr. Seuss movie? True, I may like Jim Carrey's costume as the Grinch, but outside of that, everything else was just blech. If you really want a good telling of the story, read the fucking book. I especially want to say that way for the next film, The Cat in the Hat. Quite arguably, the worst live-action film I've seen. And before you ask, no, I haven't seen Garbage Pail Kids or fucking Freddy Got Fingered. Probably stay away from that atrocity. But this movie's still bad. If you thought The Grinch was bad with the adult humor, just look at this movie. It's plastered with all kinds of adult humor, and every time they do it, it's just painful. The Cat in the Hat is not a character that should be making adult jokes. It's the fucking Cat in the Hat. Speaking of which, the costume that Mike Myers had to put up with looks like crap. Also, the effects in this movie are pretty bad. I mean, I understand that this movie was made by Bo Welch and he's a pretty good designer, and truth be told, I do like the way the house looks when it's completely fucked up, but man, this movie looks ugly. It even fucks up the storytelling, turning what was once a simple message into a completely fucked up one that makes our characters' development feel so forced and so stupid. Until I see those other atrocities I mentioned before, this is for now the worst live-action movie I've ever seen. And I know you could technically say, oh, but The Room is worse. I don't care. I watched the movie because it's a guilty pleasure. It's bad, yes, but it's so good. I cannot say the same for this movie. And sadly, that's all the time I've got for today. I know I could have gotten into a lot more live-action movies, but I just wanted to particularly talk about the ones that I wanted to talk about in this video. And I know you're probably going to complain that some movies didn't end up in this video, but hey, as I said, I haven't seen everything. Maybe I'll do another live-action video at some point, but for now, I'm just going to stick to talking about animation. But until next time, thank you all for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed it, and have a good day.